Second point I would make is that this will be part of the final due diligence that's undertaken, there's a slide coming up later on about the scope of that, and it includes technical review of all the documents, and we will be asking our legal advisors to provide us with a final review on all of those documents.
Thank you. Councillor Scott, I'll come back to you, Councillor Barker.
Yes, so can I just come back to that condition subsequent in the water user agreement? I think I heard Councillor Balfour question that the farm advisory plan was inadequate. I think that the condition subsequent, as I have read it, and I'd like clarification on this, is quite strict. It is if the application of a fully prepared and adequately prepared farm environment plan shows that the leaching rates cannot be met according to the plan provisions. Is that the correct terminology that's in it?
I think that is, Councillor. I don't have that in front of me. So really the condition subsequent is around the technical aspect of whether or not a land user is able to comply with the overseer requirements. If the landowner has failed to prepare a farm environment management plan or has prepared an inadequate one, they are still obliged to pay for the water.
Thank you. Councillor Barker.
My question is about the water user agreement. Simply, why has this water user agreement not been referred to our legal counsel for advice to council?
Well, Councillor, I don't actually recall a specific resolution of council, and I do stand to be corrected, so I apologise if I'm wrong. But I don't recall a specific request to do that. But the as I explained in the, and like I said, I may be wrong, and I do apologise if I am. In which case, it's an oversight. The water user agreement, though, will be part of the final legal review that can be undertaken by our legal advisors prior to financial close.
Subsequent question. Is it not correct that all of this structure, financial structure, is underpinned by legally binding water user agreements? That the numbers only work if people are bound in. This is one of the most fundamental documents of all. We have discussed this. So if it's the most fundamental document, why has it not been referred to our legal counsel for advice? And the second subsequent question to this is, if it was intended to be in the longer document, but was found it was not in the right place, and it was pulled out, I can understand that. But this does not undermine the importance of this document and does not undermine the scrutiny it should be subject to and advice to this council. Where it's located on the train is immaterial to me. Immaterial. Whereas at the front or the back is immaterial. But it is fundamental to this train.
Okay.
This, as I indicated earlier, this will be looked at as part of the one of the requirements of any investment by this council is that this project has to meet all its conditions precedent. Obviously, one of those is a minimum threshold of 40 million cubic metres. So as part of the final due diligence around you satisfying yourselves that these conditions precedent have been set, we will ensure that those water user agreements up to that amount are legally binding.
Councillor Bevan.
Thank you, Chair. It's fundamental to the whole business case for the RWSS that we have 40 million cubes of water signed up, and I have a very specific recollection that we added the word unconditionally in there, and somehow the word unconditional has disappeared. I don't know how that's happened, but in my view, if we don't have unconditional agreements, we have nothing to base a business case on. I am very worried about the conditions subsequent because although there's an objective test that's applied for whether the farm environmental management practices document is accepted or not, It's really, right now, it's conditional upon the final form of the Board of Inquiry's report to us. And it seems to me that what we have to do is some more due diligence on this whole thing, and the chances of some of those 40 million cubic metres of water not being unconditionally signed up, depending upon whether those farm environmental management documents can be drawn up appropriately once we know what those conditions are. And I would like to find out from you, Liz, what process we can go through to evaluate whether that's going to happen or not.
When we go through a slide a bit later on about due diligence, excuse me, can I suggest, Councillor, that we then identify the specific questions or the specific areas that you wish to be completely included in a review of that process, both through the due diligence process, through our legal advisors, and following it when we will put the whole process to Deloitte as part, the whole output of that process to Deloitte.
Sorry, just to follow up. So we'll refer that to Stuart to come back to us. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I just have one really simple question around the water agreements. Why weren't the councillors given a copy of the water agreements when we know that they're out and farmers have got them? What would have been the harm to give us a copy so we could just look at it over the weekend?
I don't think there's any specific reason why not, Councillor. You were given the key, I guess, a summary of it, including my understanding was that you were concerned about the legal aspects of it and the potential and discussion around the conditions, and the information that's been given to you attempts to focus in on answering that. The water user agreement itself is a bit like the concession deed agreement. It's 80-odd pages long. So just really focusing in on the areas that were expressed as concerned, being the meeting of those both condition precedent and condition subsequent.
I can answer that. How far do you want to get your fingers into the machinery? I mean, we have experts to look at this stuff. We have some of the country's best dealing with this issue. In a pure governance sense, why would we want to get our fingers right down into the machinery?
Mr. Chairman, because this is the most fundamental agreement that's being made.
Order. Quickly answer that. Because we were all elected by the people of Hawke's Bay, respectively, in our districts. Don't interrupt me, Mr. Chair. Can I just answer that?
I'll let you answer that, but I understand that.
And we have a fiduciary duty to our ratepayers to understand all the issues. And it has been impossible for us to understand all the issues because we haven't been given even a fraction of the data. So I am not inclined in my business life to hand over fiduciary duties to others.
Any specific questions for Mr. Webster while he's here? Because I will remind everyone the meter is running. Mr. Webster, Councillor Belford, and then.
Well, then, Mr. Webster, from what you've heard here, should we be concerned or not that we could be led down a path here where we are assured that we have committed 40 million cubic meters of water under a set of agreements that, lo and behold, after we have blithely signed off our satisfaction, it turns out that, well, they're not really that firm after all. With the obvious implications. Can you advise me, are we adequately protected from that scenario?
Councillor, the safety net is that there will be further due diligence, and if there are issues with regard to those user agreements, then they'll be raised at the time, and there can be further negotiation in relation to them.
Councillor Bevan.
Thank you, Chair. There's one other element of your advice that I'd like to get some clarification on for the sake of the people here. Sure. I'll read it out. It's 3.1 on page 13 of the supplementary papers. There are some fundamental issues that are likely to involve HBRC changing its commercial position vis-à-vis HBRC. Those will require serious consideration at a reasonably high level. Examples of these issues include the frequency of project audits, automatic assignment rights, assignment of resource consents, and the exclusion of consequential loss. In that respect, we refer to the comments in our 8 April letter and remain to be convinced about HBRC's position on these. I'm very confused about what all of that means, and I would like a layman clarification of it, if that's possible, and for you to advise whether there has been any further communication with you since you wrote this letter on the 18th of June with HBRC to resolve whatever these issues are.
Sure. I've spoken to Amon Nuns, who's running this project at Bell Gully, and we have an understanding that there's further dialogue to be had. But can I say that in paragraph 2 of my letter I've indicated that there are no showstoppers here. If there were, I would certainly be identifying those, but there aren't any showstoppers. And if I can perhaps explain what I mean by no showstoppers, for example, if HBRC's lawyers held their line and there were no further amendments made to the concession deed or the project agreement, I would not be advising HBRC against signing the documents. So there are no showstoppers. These are simply commercial positions taken by HBRC, and HBRC can respond to those. The document, in my view, could be better, could be more favourable for HBRC, but in the commercial world, there's obviously room for negotiation. So to round that off, the dialogue will continue. I have an understanding with Bell Gully that we will discuss these specific matters. They're all identified. We know what they are. Our views have been set out plainly in the 8 April letter, and the dialogue will continue. But I'm not concerned about the outcome on those, provided HBRC is happy to accept the commercial position taken by HBRC.
So you say that there are fundamental issues, but they're not that fundamental?
Correct. Can I say that if you have a look at the table of amendments made, there are some small de minimis semantic things that we disagree with about interpretation and so on. Those are easily resolved, but if HBRC kept its position on those, that wouldn't be the end of the world, wouldn't die in a ditch over those. The fundamental things are more meaty, but they are not showstoppers. They're not matters where I would say to HBRC, you cannot under any circumstances sign this document as it is.
Councillor Barker.
I just want your opinion here on process. Have you seen the resolution that's been put before Council today?
Yes, I have.
With that in mind, if this, given that we have not yet seen the water use agreement, not had legal advice on the water use agreement, etc., what power would the regional council have to stop the process if regional councillors themselves disagreed with the water user agreement? Because it seems to me the resolution as it's written makes the decision and then hands over all of the subsequent decision making to HBRC. The regional council, if it passes the resolution in its current form, delegates all the decisions to HBRC and therefore loses any power or ability to make a decision about the acceptability or other of the water users agreement.
I think, Councillor, it comes back to Council being satisfied about the 40 million cubes, and it's a due diligence matter. And if the advice is in respect of those water user agreements that there's no certainty about take-up, then as a condition subsequent, that matter can then be raised and used to, I think, circumvent the whole process.
But excuse me, can I just finish this? But it's a condition subsequent. The point I'm making here is that the shape of the resolution before the council gives all of that decision-making power to HBRC. HBRC will determine for itself whether the conditions precedent are met. The way the council resolution is shaped, that decision will no longer come back to council itself. So my point is that all of the decision about the water users agreement will then rest, in the way this resolution is written, with HBRC and will not come back to HBRC. Oh, really?
talking 8.3 here.
8.3.
3 and 4.
All of A. All of A.